Yeah. Okay, so as you're coming into the webinar, just please post in the chat where you're from. We always like to see where people are signing in from. In Australia, we're doing this at 8 o'clock at night on the East Coast because what time is it, Robyn?
10 a.m.
10 a.m. So, you know, to do it in the middle of our afternoon would be in the middle of the night for Robyn. That's really unfair. So, so East Coast of Australia, California, Pennsylvania. Great. Oh, and I'm going to just make this to all the attendees and the panelists. Yep. So we'll just give it a few minutes. Oh, my earbuds don't seem to be working. Okay, never mind. Sometimes they just don't seem to work on Zoom. I don't know what it is. I'll just yell at my screen. Today, my background is Rappahannock County. We've had a lot of rain the past 24 hours, and the clouds are really big and heavy and floating over the mountains, so they look really gorgeous. So that's my background today. All righty. Let's just see. It looks like it's slowing down a little bit. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'll just do a little intro for us, Robyn, okay? So hi, everybody. I'm Wendy Murdoch. I've been bringing you a series of webinars. Tonight is about SURE PAWS with Robyn Larson-Shelton. Did I get it right? Okay. I've mixed up your name so many times. I'm just going to call you Robyn because that makes my life easier. Robyn's from Australia. She actually is in Australia. And is it 2 years ago now that you called me?
Maybe something like that, yeah.
When's the Shahrazad endurance ride?
That's in August.
Okay, so
I had them before then.
Right.
Yeah.
We started to talk after you went to that endurance ride and worked with a whole bunch of endurance horses with the SureFoot pads, and so we Skyped a call, and I found out a little more about Robyn and her background. She works with horses and dogs. And so when I started to make the prototypes for the SURE PAWS pads, I have Felice Deppler, who's over in Switzerland and Sweden, testing them out. And I sent a set off to Robyn. I sent her a firm, medium, soft, and slants. And there's a little joke about that. We'll get to that later. So anyway, Robyn's been working with the SURE PAWS pads. How long did I send those to you?
It's they arrived at one of my Darwin trips. So I can't remember which one. It's over a year.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's well over a year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so Robyn's been working with them. And then last October, I had the fortune to go over to Australia and New Zealand and meet Robyn and see her work with the SURE PAWS pads. And then we found out that she had 4 pads, not 3 pads, but that's okay. 2 of them had gotten a little stuck together in the travel, and she thought it was 1 2-inch pad, and then I pulled them apart, and she realized she had a soft, a medium, firm, and a slant. At the time, Robyn has the large pads, and those are the same size as the horse physio pads, 24 by 16 by 1.5 inches. The dog pads are 24 by 16 by 1 inch. And so what we have right now are the half size, the smaller ones, which are the same size as the half physio pad. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. But I'd like Robyn to just introduce herself here so that people get to know you a little bit, Robyn. So just give us a little bit about your background and how you wound up working with dogs.
Okay, so I started off as a horse therapist nearly 20 years ago now. And because I was helping people's horses, and most horse people have dogs, they asked me if I could work on their dogs as well. So I just started off helping people out as you do, and then decided, well, if I'm actually going to work on dogs, I better get some qualifications. So I did some Bowen therapy courses, and I've done joint mobilization with an osteopath, and a lot of I have actually just finished a canine remedial massage course, but a lot of what I do is actually transferred from the horses. So dogs are not exactly the same, but just like we use the same techniques on people that we use on horses in some cases, the same with the dogs. So I've been working with dogs now as a therapist for probably around about the 12 years, I suppose.
So quite a while, yeah. And so, and you work with a lot of performance dogs, right?
Yes, a large part of my client base are show dogs, lure coursing dogs, and agility dogs. And then they probably take up about half of my client base, and the other half would be geriatric dogs. And that's really common for canine therapists, that a large part of your practice is always going to be the geriatric dogs, because that's often for pet owners when they start to really notice a problem with their dog and they want to improve their quality of life.
Yeah, so that middle period when the dog is fairly young and athletic, we don't tend to think about any kind of rehabilitation or physical therapy for the dogs. It's, if they're performance dogs, you probably see a lot of injuries. And in the older dogs, a lot of just old age.
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, quite often in the older dogs, I see a lot of injuries that were not found either. You know, which the dog's quality of life would have been a lot better if that had been rehabilitated when they were younger. And in the performance dogs, most of my clients are the sort of people who want to keep their dog on top of its game. So they're regular clients. I don't get so many people coming to me because they have an injury. And then because they're regular clients and they're the sort of people that help their dogs, I don't see so much in the way of minor injuries, yes, but not so much major injuries.
So they're more coming in from the preventative side to make sure that they don't have the injuries.
Absolutely, yes. And to be honest, if they're got a significant injury or need a significant surgery, I actually refer them in Canberra now. We have a practicing canine rehabilitation veterinarian.
Wow.
So actually it's really cool because I can initially send them to her for, you know, a proper rehab program.
Nice. All right. And so you got a hold of you actually started with the horse pads first with the dogs, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people do, right?
Yeah, of course. And they use them on themselves too. So with I was seeing such extraordinary changes in the horses. I thought, well, this is, and we know they help people. So I thought this absolutely has to help dogs as well. So I started off using, the first one I started using was the slant, because a lot of dogs, especially performance dogs and dogs with hip problems, have very tight hip flexors, very tight psoas muscle, and generally tight through all that fascia that connects up into their back. And I know how the slants work for the horses, so I thought, oh, I'm going to try this with the dogs, and was just blown away. Absolutely gobsmacked by the results. And so then I started trying the flat ones. The problem with the horse pads for the dogs, and you can use them if you have them, you can use them with your dogs, is that because of the high profile and the way you can't control a dog's foot like you can a horse's foot, they can tend to put their foot on the side of it and then flip the pad. Okay. And that could hurt the dog, but it is very likely to frighten the dog. Right. So you have to be really, really careful using the horse pads until they're used to them, and then depending on the dog. Like I had a couple of cane corsos and I used to set up a walking trail for them. In fact, I still do when I would go to see them, and they didn't care, like pads would fly off everywhere because they just keep plonking through them. You know, they're like a Mastiff breed. Oh, okay. And they just thought it was fun. And we just, you know, and if they managed to go through the pads without tipping anywhere, they got a big reward. Like, we'd be so excited. But it still helped their proprioception. But you do just have to be careful that you don't, you know, hurt the dog or frighten them.
And one of the things that we found with the Surefoot pads is that the colored surface can be a bit slippy. So one of the things we did to try and decrease that is we added something called soft sand to the painted top to give it a little bit more texture and a little bit more grip for the dogs. And we do have, I want to mention Felice Depler, who's in Switzerland and Sweden. She works with sled dogs. And one of the things they found that was really helpful is that anti-slip material that you have under your carpet. If you put the pads on that, it keeps them from sliding around, because if a dog kind of hits it on a slick surface, it can move and slide. So you do have to be a little more careful, because they can move them, and you don't want them slipping off or the pads kind of getting away from them. But those are just simple things, easy to manage. We've actually been working on a Velcro system to be able to Velcro pads together. It's not in production yet, it's still in prototype stage, but SURE PAWS in general is still in beta testing, because we made Robyn's set, which is the full size, and then we made some of the small ones, and we still have some design things that we want to do, like the Velcro, but people have been using them and asking me about them, which is why I was really excited to have Robyn join me, because she has been using them so much, and I figured we might as well get started, and that's going to push me along to get the product really up to speed.
Yeah, I know how that works.
Yeah.
I have to say, I don't have so much of a problem with the pads slipping. And I think one of the differences might be that I'm usually working indoors with the dogs, and quite often on a carpet surface, or even I can use them on my tiles in my house, and I don't have much of a problem with slipping, but we have kind of a rough tile. Yeah, so I haven't found the slipping to be such a problem.
Oh, good. All right, so let's, I've got some photos that you sent me, and is there any particular one you want me to start with?
The Saluki standing on the shore hoof, if you can see him with a man, he's on a grooming table.
Oh, yeah, I remember this one. All right, so I'm going to do my screen share here. Give me a sec. There we go.
Okay. So this guy is standing on the shore hoof slants.
Yes, and these are the horse pads here.
Yes. And he was a real watershed moment for me. When I started using the slants with the horses and I saw what they could do, I asked if Bear would bring this dog to see me again. We're actually at his place. Because he had a problem with very, very tight hamstrings, very, very tight hip flexors, like hamstrings bulging out, like you'd never even see on your reining quarter horse, you know, huge hamstrings. And this breed of dog, Saluki, they're bred to run. So they do have good hamstrings, but his were huge, overdeveloped and tight. And his back was always roached up. And he was also bow-legged behind. So how do I do that? My hand's on the screen. So kind of his legs bent out like that behind. And they really just wanted to rehab him to the point where he could be found a pet home. So, but I had seen him a few times, and while I could help him a little bit, I certainly couldn't fix him. And he'd also been to several veterinarians, chiropractors, like so many people had had a go with this dog. And so I decided to try the pads. And the first session, we saw a definite slight difference. So his back went from being quite roached down maybe about that much. And Bear and I looked at each other and went, oh, well, that looks like an improvement. And the other thing this dog used to do was like hop behind. He would just, it was like something pinched him and he would just start hopping on one leg for a few steps and then keep going. And when I saw him a week later, Bear reported that they'd only seen him hopping once. So the second session, which I think is when I took this photo, we just sat there looking at the dog and then looking at each other and saying, like, is that even possible? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Because we saw this roached back. Now you can see with this Saluki that his back is actually quite flat.
Yeah.
So at the start of this session, that back was quite roached. And the angles on his hind legs were much straighter. And as he stood on those pads, we just watched it drop down. and we watched him develop better angles in the hind limb. And we did 3 sessions a week apart, and we also noticed that he was not as bow-legged behind and he had stopped hopping.
In 3
So again,
sessions over a week, just a week apart.
3 weeks, 3 sessions in 3 weeks. And when I say a session, I did nothing else with the dog. So I used no other therapies. I just wanted to test the pads.
And so how long did he stand on the pads?
Yeah, probably anywhere from 30 seconds to a couple of minutes in between us moving him. So he would stand on the pads and then he would go for a walk, and then we would come back and stand on the pads. Here he's on the grooming table because Bear has very bad knees. So it's really difficult for him to help me with the dog if we're on the ground. So he would just lower the grooming table down and the dog would walk off and have a little walk around. So when I say sessions, I might have spent 15 minutes, absolute maximum, with Bear and the dog to achieve this. Now, it does turn out we didn't fix him again. He was eventually diagnosed with a cervical injury that a vet thinks happened when he was a puppy. However, he was sent to, like, they were confident enough to be able to send him to a pet home with a management program that the dog was going to be able to be comfortable, and using the pads is definitely part of that management program. So the other thing that was really noticeable was the hamstrings. Even in the very first maybe 30 seconds he stood on those pads, his hamstrings went from, I can't describe how hard they were like rocks. They went to the point where I could actually push my finger in. Like, it was just Bear's a very experienced dog person, and we were just mind boggled.
Well, I remember when you did this, because you contacted me on Facebook and you sent me a picture, and it was astounding.
Yeah, it's so the dog, the SURE PAWS slants will do the same thing. They're just easier to manage a dog
Right.
on. They do exactly.
They're just, the SURE PAWS pads are 16 inches long, the same angle as the horse pads with the soft sand. So it's a single pad rather than two separate pads.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty incredible story. And I remember that now that you show that picture, so that certainly got you hooked, didn't it?
Yeah, so he was like one of my first trials with using the pads, even though they were the horse ones. And so from then on, the pads kept coming out and being used. And I'm lucky I have a very open-minded client base. So they're really happy, and a lot of them are very, very experienced dog people. So they're able to see the changes as well.
From my experience, the dogs are a little more subtle, although that's not subtle, but they tend to be a little bit more subtle in their responses to the pads. Horses are pretty, if you will, obvious. They'll see breathing changes in 3 to 10 seconds. You'll see licking and chewing, head lowering. So what kind of signs do you see with the dogs?
Pretty much the same as the horses, really. Perhaps not so much yawning, but we definitely got to get a lot of lip licking. The dogs will want to sit, usually, very quickly, which to me is a sign of relaxation. Mm-hmm. So they will want to sit. They'll often want to lay down on the pads as well. And you and I had this conversation about, why do they lay down? Well, of course, horses might lay down on them too if they had the option, but it's not an option. And one of the things, if you have your hand on your dog when they're on the pads, is you will feel the relaxation in the tissues. You'll see the head lowering, all those typical relaxation things. You'll see postural changes quite quickly. So with the dogs, I don't know that the changes are actually more subtle than with the horses. I just think because dogs are smaller, it's harder for us to see. If you know what you're looking at, just like, if you're a horse person that knows what they're looking at, you can see the changes, like the postural changes can be really marked very quickly.
Yeah. So let's look at another picture here. Tell me which one you want me to grab.
Oh, I don't mind. I can't remember what's in there. Just
we've got a terrier, a little
okay.
brown
Yep, that's
spotted terrier. It's very cute. Okay, let me.
Yes, it's very cute.
I got to get back to where. Oh no, that was the wrong thing to do. Don't do that. I just have to diminish this so I can get to my screen share. There we go. Here we go. Yeah.
All right. So this is the day that I got the SURE PAWS pads.
Oh.
This is the day that they arrived in Darwin. I don't live in Darwin, but I have a practice up there where I visit, and I was Wendy sent them to Darwin because I was really keen to use them because I have lots and lots of dog clients up there. So this is Ditto. She was the first dog that ever went on the pads. I think she's about 18 months old here. She's still not mature. You can see that her back is definitely a little bit tight. That's why her owner brought her into me. You can see her back is a bit rounded and lifted. It's not meant to be, especially when she's standing in that position. So I thought, oh well, we'll give these pads a try. And I was so excited because it was so easy for me to manage in that session. So this is a very small dog. So managing her on the SURE hoof pads would have been really tricky. Yeah. But here she's up on a table that I used to work with the smaller dogs on, and she's able to just stand on the pad, and she would fit on the smaller size pads as well. And so she can stand on that while I'm working on her. So with the smaller dogs, this is something that I actually usually do now is if I'm using a table for them, I will put a pad on the table, and then I will do their therapy, whatever it is that I'm doing, while they're standing on that pad. If they're uncomfortable, I'll take it away, or I might swap it for one. And it's really interesting because owners will often, because they're standing there with their hands on the dog too, they will often, I'll see their face when they feel the dog start to relax. And it's really, really quick on the SURE PAWS. So that's the other thing. You've probably got to be there then in the moment at the start, because that's when the changes start. So here I'm just having a little play around with Ditto. So I've got her standing on 2 pads with her front feet. And this is actually a really good exercise for dogs to do. It's a good position for dogs to get into. It helps their hind end, and it helps to take pressure off the front end. So you can see it's just really easy with those pads because they're nice and big. And then we also have the benefit, I don't know if you can see how her feet are sinking into the pads a little bit. It's probably not so easy to see. Yeah, easier to see on that photo. You can see her front feet. It's not a lot, but it's happening, and it's really important. And one of the things that stands out with the SURE PAWS, as opposed to they are a form of balance equipment for dogs, and absolutely should be in any performance dog's kit for training, is the difference is they don't wobble the dog off. So you can buy wobble boards for dogs, and you can buy air-filled equipment, but it's really difficult for the dog to stand on. It's meant to be. Its aim is to try and wobble the dog off, so the dog has to balance. But that's too difficult for so many dogs, you know, especially older dogs or dogs that are recovering from an injury. So the SURE PAWS will encourage them to balance and use their isometric muscles, but they're not tipping the dog off. So just like the SURE foot pads, it's a different feel. And this photo is really cute because Ditto has finished her session, and she was on the floor while I worked on another dog, and she's chosen to be on the pads. She's actually in charge of the Rottweilers. I think there's probably about 3 Rottweilers in the room at that time. And she's the boss. And she said, I'm having these pads. And she did lay down on them after a while too. And that's another common feature. You give the dogs the option, they'll go and sit or lay on them.
That's another choice.
So that's a good example of what I'm saying. Give the dogs an option, and then they'll go and use them themselves.
And I have on the SURE PAWS Facebook page, on the header picture, someone sent me a picture of an Italian greyhound that was standing on the horse full physio pad on the hard side and left little tiny paw prints, and it was amazing. It was so cute. So that's up on the header, because I thought that was incredible that a dog that small could still make an impression on the regular horse physio pad.
Yeah, it just shows I guess the interaction between the heat and the animal and the physiology of the animal and the pad itself. It's almost like it's they're 2 living things talking to each other.
Yeah. All right, so shall we go on to that next picture?
Yep, I don't know how long we've got. Don't forget to do Barkley, the golden retriever. So he's the one you've got a
all right, well, let's go to him. Hang on, let me find him. Was that one of the in the photos that you sent me?
Yep, so he's a golden retriever. He's on the lead and he's standing on the pads.
Hang on, I have to do this, and I'm going to just pause the share while I find him. I don't want to make anybody nauseous while I'm flipping through. There's some, oh yeah, here he is. Okay.
So he's the one that you've got the
testimonial.
Yeah, if you want to read it out, or I've got on my phone if you want me to read it out.
Yeah, so his owner, Sarah, said that Barkley was displaying unsoundness in his hindquarters with a suspected degree of hip dysplasia. After using the SURE PAWS in much the same way as Qatar, Qatar's the Rottweiler, there were visible changes in the way he moved. He appeared more stable and relaxed when standing, less inclined to stand with those legs under himself, and when moving, he was less inclined to single track his feet and maintain parallel movement with his front legs.
Yeah. So I teach a clinic which is Canine Bodyworks for dog owners. And in that clinic, I teach them a few different hands-on techniques, some assessment techniques, and just some little basic exercises that they can do with their dogs to help them. And of course, the SURE PAWS are part of what I want to show them, which has been a bit frustrating. They can't go buy them because they make such a big difference and they're so easy to use. So yeah, this is Barkley. I think he's about 6 years old. I don't know if you should have another photo there, a bit more from the side.
Yep.
Which kind of shows his hip dysplasia better. So you can see his posture there. He's quite crouched down behind. And if you have a look, like between his hock or just above his stifle or knee, yep, and then back towards the tail. Through that area, there's really atrophied. Like, yeah, there's just no muscle there. So although he hasn't been x-rayed, you know, they're pretty sure that he has hip dysplasia, and the vets told him he has hip dysplasia, and they've just opted not to x-ray him. So this was actually a little experiment of mine, because he came along to the clinic and I said, before we do anything, can I just have a little play? So we took him outside, and this is how I set the pads up. And we encouraged Barkley initially to stand there for maybe 20 seconds, and then we just walked him off. So he walked off onto the concrete, around on the grass, and then back onto the pads again. And we just did a mixture of walking him over them, and then if he seemed like he wanted to stop on the pads, we would let him stop and stand and then walk on. Probably worked with him absolute maximum of 5 minutes, probably 3 minutes, because I'm also aware of the fact that he will be using himself a bit differently and using muscles differently, so we don't want to make him sore either. And initially he was walking in this crouched position, and his hind legs were actually crossing over,
Oh,
So they were going right to the midline, and he was quite wobbly when you watched him behind, a little bit ataxic, we would say. And after, just within a couple of sessions of standing and walking across the pads, he had already improved, and it made a really big difference. And it was interesting because there was a bunch of people there. I think there was about 12 people in the course. One lady, she's in her 60s, she has her first dog, who's a geriatric dog, doesn't know, anything about dogs, to a guy who used to handle and train dogs for customs in Australia. So a huge variation of knowledge base, and everyone could see the difference. And I was very quiet about the difference because I just wanted to see what people thought, and everyone could see the difference. So we put Barkley away. He did have, he sat in his crate. He did have a little bit of practice massage and stuff from the students, not a lot. And in the afternoon, we brought him out again, and he was still walking better. So a couple of hours later, 2 or 3 hours later, he was still moving better, and we did another very short session on the pads, and he was moving even better.
So this brings me to the question, I'm going to stop my share for a second, is how do you think that's happening?
Okay, so, I mean, you probably know better than I do, Wendy.
We're all guessing still.
Well, yeah, well, our experience is that it improves proprioception and body awareness. Now, when you have, now you pull me up if I'm wrong on any of this.
Yeah.
When we have chronic pain, we tend to shut down to that part of the body, and we lose the proprioception from that part of the body. So proprioception being that thing that tells us where we are in space at any one time and where our joints are. So if I lift my hand up there, I don't have to look at it to know it's above my head. That's kind of proprioception. And it's, I think that's one reason why elderly people with hip problems fall over, because they lose a bit of functionality, but they also lose the ability to know where that foot and leg are in space, because the hip is a very important proprioceptor. And I think it's very important in dogs and horses too. So when you have hip dysplasia, you've got a loose joint and a painful joint. That is also a major part of the body's, the dog's feedback system, where they are in space, what their hind feet are doing them, as well as it's really uncomfortable. So I think with the SURE Paws, they do a number of things. They help to reawaken those neural pathways, so the dog is getting proper feedback from its feet and its other joints to the brain as to where it is and what it's doing. I think they also take away some of the pain, so it's more comfortable for the dog to move better. And I think they also help switch on those little stabilizing muscles, those muscles that keep us still when we're standing on a train or a moving surface, which we should be using all the time. But in dogs with problems like Barkley, they tend to get switched off. They're not using them. And so I think it helps to switch those on. And so then the dog is more stable, because you could see how atrophied those big muscles, important muscles were. So they're not going to help him much at all. And by using the SURE Paws, we would have switched them on a little bit, but also those other tiny little muscles.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it has a lot to do with switching things back on. I had Catherine Wyckoff last night as my guest. She's another Feldenkrais practitioner, and she talks about, the body mapping, and we need to keep upgrading our body map. We need to keep refreshing it, and like we upgrade the system in our phone, we need to keep upgrading our body map so that we keep using our body in an efficient way. And when we, if you don't use it and you lose it, right? What's that expression? Use it or lose it. And so when we stop using certain body parts in the way they're designed, we tend to stop using them, and we start to lose that connection. So, I have to agree with you. I think it has a lot to do with just kicking back the proprioceptors, kicking them back in and getting them functioning again. Somebody's asked a question if it's better to pick up the pads or leave them down as you have there. So you had set them down. What do you typically do? Just set the pads down and walk the dogs over the pads, or I know when you're working on your table, you'll put them on the table.
Yeah. So when I'm working with bigger dogs, and it depends on what our aim is. So if I'm doing therapy on the bigger dog and I'm on the floor with the dog, then I'll encourage them to choose a pad or pads to sit or lie on. But they don't have to. It's choice, like it is with the horses, but I offer them that choice. And it's kind of interesting what some of them will choose to do. But when I'm working with a dog like Barkley, where I want to try and improve their awareness, their gait, etc., then I just put the pads on the ground. If he was a smaller dog, I would put them end to end, so I'd make a slightly longer runway. But you can see that runway is not much longer than the dog, and it makes a big difference to the dog.
Now you can give us a little live demo of that, right?
I can. Do you want to do that now? Sorry?
I know you're set up for it because we saw that before we got started.
Yeah, that's not, yes, I can do kind of a demo. Do you want me to do that now or later?
Yeah, sure.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay, alrighty. So you will have to tell me when the camera's in the right position.
Okay.
I have to get my Labrador to come play the game with us.
A little lower. I see the little dog on his dog bed. Yep, now we see the pads. Perfect.
Actually, if I go that way, the only problem with this will be Happy doesn't like walking past. The boss dog is in the cage there, or the crate, I should say. It's not. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. So these are the full-size pads, the large ones, the same size as the physio pads.
I think are the ones you've got now, are they more this size?
They're the size of the half physio pads, so they're half the size of the full.
Yeah, yep. So a little bit smaller than this one. Okay.
Yeah, they're that length, 16 by 12 by 1. Yep.
Okay. Happy? Here, mate. Come on. You're up, buddy.
Well, she's just lining them up side by side. You can do them end to end if you want a longer runway or a wider runway.
So, and then I'll just encourage a dog to walk on and maybe stand on the pads. Hopefully you can see Happy. Turn around. And then walk off. Happy.
We can see why you named him Happy.
And back on the pads. And then I might encourage the dog to just stand. A lot of dogs, of course, I've got a treat, and a lot of dogs will also straight away want to sit. So I don't discourage that. If that's what they want to do, and if they want to lay down, I don't discourage that either, because we don't know exactly how these things work, and I think we're often a bit arrogant in thinking that we know what's right. Yeah. And so I'll give them an option, and then we'll just let Happy walk off again.
And he seems very comfortable hanging out on the pads.
Oh yeah, well he has been, a lot of his retraining has been on the pads. The other thing to remember about these is they're very relaxing. So that's something we haven't talked about yet. That is also really important. So they're quite relaxing for the dog, and they relax muscles and they relax posture. So it's a bit like anyone who does yoga or probably Feldenkrais classes and things like that. We know that to get rid of a posture or a tightness, you have to relax everything first. Yep. So I think that's another thing that's really important, and that's another reason why if they want to sit or lay on the pads, that's fine by me. So I don't move the pads really, I move the dog. Well, because you want the dog, you actually want the dog to move around. He wants to go back on the pad. You actually want the dog to move around and feel what its body is like after it's been on the pad. So in my opinion, it's like, I guess, changing that mapping for the dog. So it's a bit like if you just stayed on the pads the whole time. Well, it's the same as when we do the demos with the horses. You know, you get the owner to stand on the pads and then walk off them and
Yep.
feel the difference, and it awakens things. So it's the same with the dogs. Now, if I want to use the slant, where do I put the slant, Abby? Oh, here it is.
And when you said you had to rehab Happy, what was going on that you had to do rehab?
Okay, so Happy is we adopted him, so he's an adopted dog. We adopted him about 18 months ago. He'd never been out of the backyard. He'd hardly been out of a house ever. He had no muscle at all, and his feet, they're still pretty flat, but man, they were so flat. They were terrible. And when he went across the ground, he like flopped. He would just be like really heavy footed. And when we first got him, and the first time I ever let him loose anywhere, I just had to look away. And my partner said to me, what is your problem? I said, I can't look at the way this dog moves. It's so terrible. So the SURE PAWS Pads have, we think he has, because he is nearly 10, so we think he has a little bit of probably some arthritis in his hips and his knees back there. So the SURE PAWS have been part of improving his balance and proprioception, as well as helping him with his muscle. So what I would do with the slant is, now that I have all these, I often sit the slant on top of the other pads because it will sit there better. And it seems to help give the dog a bit of a guide. Happy, just stand up for me, please. Just walk him onto it. Come on. Stand there. Good boy. Good boy. So that's probably the wrong way to do it. Can you actually see him on it?
We did a little bit, yep.
I think it might actually be easier to put it that way. Come on.
It's a little out of our scene there with that far. Like, we can see the blue pad clearly, but we can't see the medium pad.
So one of the things I might do, depending on the dog, is I might place his feet. So you can see with Happy it doesn't work very well, but with a show dog you can do that because they're used to having their feet placed.
Right.
Just for the purposes of demonstration. Put your feet on there, dude. Well, he's kind of got his feet on it.
Yeah.
And that's probably a good demonstration, because we can't expect the dog to, you know, straight away do exactly. Good boy, there you go. There you got a foot on it. So that's one way that I use the slants. Good boy, good boy. There's a lot of different ways to use them, but I found the biggest use for me is, oh, good man, is releasing this lower back area and releasing the hip flexors, and encouraging better pelvic angle. And also the little dogs, you see a lot of little guys where their legs are just straight up and down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're way too upright behind, and the slants actually give them a chance to get some angulation going.
And it's interesting that he chose to sit on the slant too.
Yes, yeah, he's actually rolled back on his tail, which he doesn't normally do. So there'll be a reason for that. And it'll be doing something for him. I just can't tell you exactly what.
Well, that's been a marvelous live demo. So, so why don't we come back and talk about, I know that you have more pictures here.
Yeah, and we need to,
that was awesome.
Thanks, Happy.
Yeah.
I have to say with Happy now, he is like a four-wheel drive dog. He literally climbs rocks, jumps logs, jumps up and down things. Like his whole, I can't believe that you could train a dog, or it's not training so much, training as in teaching them, like getting them to move and cover ground he's just amazing. You see him in the bush, he's just round and over and everything. Yeah, completely different dog, and his feet are not as flat. So he's been lucky. And of course, he was one of my practice dogs, kind of my own little personal case studies with the SURE Paws.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And so, yeah, somebody said they're actually sitting there with the full physio pad behind them on the couch right now, warm and soothing.
Well, I've been spending a lot of time at my desk lately instead of out working on animals, and I have one of the SURE Paws pads under my feet at my desk.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so,
we also need to do Qatar's story. So
is that the one in the nightgown? Oh, the Rottweiler.
Yeah, in the email, yeah.
Oh, okay. Do I have a picture of him?
No, and she's just sent me video.
Oh, here's another picture of, no, he's looked at that pad.
Yeah, I don't think the video that has just come through of him doesn't really help us. So,
no, but this is kind of interesting. Can you see who's on the pads here?
And I am there to work on, these are the ladies that have the cane corsos.
Oh, yeah.
And so the pads are lined up. Now, I use the slant just as another pad for them to walk across. So I've been walking them across these. And then when I sit down on the floor to work on them, the dogs can choose to sit on the pads or not. But the cat, he loves to come and sit on the pads, and he will even sit on the pads in front of these giant slobbery dogs and just say, no, it's my spot. Like, he always turns up, and he always goes and puts himself on the pads. So there he is again.
The cats are really funny. You don't ask them, they choose to sit on the pads. It's really, I think oh, there's somebody. Who's that? Very cute.
That's Sienna. You probably just saw in the video, she was trying to sneak in. And,
yeah.
Yeah, so, and that's on the same floor here. And I've just got the pads laying there, and I came out and found her laying on them, which I really encourage people to do if they've got the SURE Paws pads and their dog doesn't chew things up. Then give the dogs the choice, give them. Harry has got probably 4 beds around that she can lay on. She has chosen those, and please ignore her nails. She's another adopted dog. We are working on those nails. Yeah, so if you leave them around and just give the dogs a chance to use them, they will.
Yep. You do have to watch that they don't start to claw at the pads, because the toenails can damage the pads.
Yeah, that too.
Yep.
So this is actually another cat. It's not the same cat.
Oh, okay.
And this is this guy is actually quite a nervous cat. So this was during the bushfires here in New South Wales a few months ago, and so I was meeting this client at a different place, and her cats had been evacuated to this place as well, and they weren't settling in very well. And her dog is actually not a huge fan of the SURE Paws pads. And when I say not a huge fan, these dogs only see the pads when they see me. So it's not as if I am, if they had the pads and we use them every day, I'm sure he would become a fan, but he's not. But the cat, so the cat came over, and his owner was really happy because he actually relaxed, and he was in my presence. So he'd been hiding, and then after a while he let me stroke him. So she was really excited that her cat was starting to relax. And I did see a question there from Joe about preference.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Maybe the soft pad, which is what we've got here, but yeah.
I've seen them on firm. I've seen them on stack. I've seen them on top of the bags a lot.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So I think, Joe, it's probably a bit of an individual thing. It's definitely individual with the dogs. absolutely. You know, I was saying before, I put the small dogs on a table normally to work on them, and I'll see, like, I'll let them choose. If they're not comfortable, we'll swap pads, and it's really varied.
Yeah. You know, I recently I was doing a Surefoot workshop, and somebody had their dog, and he was a little terrier and kind of barky. And you know, I haven't had a dog for years because I travel too much, and they just can't handle my travel. So so I'm not around dogs as much as I used to be. But anyway, I set out my horse pads, and I just set them out, and we just kind of walked this little terrier over the pads, and you know, just wandered across them literally. And it didn't take more than a minute, and he was starting to yawn. He was stopping on the pads. And we just did like maybe 5 minutes, like 3 times, you know, like we did it at lunchtime, we did it at the end of the day, and the next day at lunchtime. But it was really obvious to see the calming down, the relaxation, the yawning, like relaxed yawning, not a nervous yawn. And so I was actually I was surprised at how little it took, actually.
It certainly doesn't take very much. So this is another self-choice. So this is one of our other adopted dogs. Excuse me. And the pads are in the back of my car, and he's chosen. Like he has a nice flat spot, and that's his mate Ellie, and she's said it's my turn. So there's a nice flat spot for them, you know, nice soft area for them to lay down on. But if that pad is sitting in there, they choose it. So yeah. So these are a couple of agility dogs, and again, there are beds everywhere for them, and we didn't tell them to sit on them to take a photo. I was actually working on a dog on the table, and I turned around and there they are.
Wow.
And so they're different ages. And this is another example. Wendy's been there. She's met these dogs.
Yeah.
And I was working on a dog on the table. You can just see his nose in the bottom corner there. And I put the pads on the floor. And Saffron has chosen to go and stand on the pads. And you can see how she's sinking into, there's 2 stuck together there.
Yeah. But that's on the soft side, and she's really sinking in on this paw especially.
Yeah, and you can see her face, like she's just really relaxed in. And so that's one of the things I like about them, is that they can be a bit of a free choice thing too. And she is again. She
managed to get all 4 feet on.
She's quite a big dog too. She's almost the size of a greyhound. So yeah, she's just chosen that. And she really does love the pads. And it's interesting because Saffron has had a really major injury. I don't remember if you remember when you saw her, and she had that big scar down the front of the shoulder blade. And it's just, you know, we don't have enough, there's not enough body of, you know, work, but to definitively say. But it's interesting that at that stage, I think Wendy had 5 dogs, the Wendy, the owner, that this one chooses to stand on them the most, and she's the one that's got huge scarring on her shoulder, and she is a very successful lure coursing dog, despite that injury. And if we'd have had SURE Paws when she had the injury, I would have absolutely been using them as part of her recovery process, but we didn't have them back then.
Yeah. All right. So so tell us about I know that there was the Rottweiler, but give us a little background on that dog.
Okay, so
do we have the video of that?
She sent me a couple of videos just now, but they're not actually very useful.
Okay.
So we don't have a video of him on the pads, no. Because I'm usually the one working. And yeah, it's just hard. I've got to do more.
No, it's really hard. And, you know, so often you're like busy doing something, and then something magical happens and you're like, where's my phone? It's nowhere near, you know. And I don't know if it would have happened if you were filming, so I totally get it.
I think it would have, but anyway. So Qatar is a 6-year-old Rottweiler. As a youngster, he appeared to be perfectly normal and healthy, and then he started to have a really odd gait behind. And when I say odd, he lifts his hind legs up much higher than he should, and they kind of wobble in the air and then come down somewhere, you know. They land all over the place. And so I do believe he's been to more than one veterinarian, and he's been to quite a few different therapists, and his owner brought him along to that Canine Bodyworks clinic that I ran in Darwin. I'd never met the dog prior to this. And so again, at lunchtime, as I did not know this lady, I hadn't met her before. Now, I should say she is a qualified Bowen therapist, and she has been a breeder of Rottweilers for, oh goodness knows how many years, 20, 30, I don't know, a long time. So I asked her if we could take him outside. I just wanted to try something at lunchtime. So exactly the same setup with the pads. I didn't have the slant, just the 3 flat ones on the ground. And he's quite a big dog, quite a long dog. And we did exactly the same thing that I did with Barkley and that I normally do. So we just introduced him to the pads. And again, he was a show dog, so it is sometimes easier because they're used to being told stand here and they go there like the horses. And so he just stood on the pads, and I was very conscious that this is a very compromised dog. He is very wobbly. So it was very short. Probably the longest I would have let him stand on them would have been 20 seconds, and then walk off and do a circuit and come back. And yeah, so that's Qatar's background. So it's believed that he's had an injury to his neck, because he does live with a lot of other Rottweilers. So the vets have decided he's not been x-rayed or anything, but they're pretty sure it's a neck injury. So I don't know if you want to read what Sarah said. So this is from an observer who is also a breeder of Rottweilers.
I only have a short little thing about without the diagnosis. I don't have the rest of it.
Okay, well, do you want me to just read it out?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. So you have to excuse me looking at my phone.
Okay.
Okay, so this is not from his owner. This is from an observer who is a very experienced dog person. Play the game, phone. Keep skipping off it. Qatar was displaying a very unstable gait and a clear blockage of sensation in all 4 feet. So I did the little knuckling test. We turn the paw over and they should put it back straight away, because otherwise they're going to trip over if they walk. So if you turn the paw over and they stand on the top of their paw, then you know they're not getting the messages through to the brain, that they've lost that proprioception. So this is, as I said, this is what Sarah said, this is not me. And a clear blockage of sensation in all 4 feet. The SURE PAWS pads were used twice during the day, with the simple task of walking on them several times and standing stationary on them. There was clear improvement following the first session, with Qatar also showing much more enthusiasm to participate in the second session. Following the second session, again, there was a visible decrease in his reaction time when testing his feet. That means when I put them upside down, he put them back much quicker. And an increase in his stability when gaiting. His condition was quite severe, so to see these improvements in such a short space of time was amazing. Wow. Now, I went to see Qatar as a patient about, it was 5 days after that clinic, and his owner reported to me then that the stability, the improvement in stability that we saw had lasted for 3 days and then started to taper off a little bit. So we did some more of that on that day that I went back to see him. But I also did some other therapy. So I did some craniosacral therapy and stuff. And then I saw him again. I saw him again on the day I left Darwin. So another 4 days later, I came back, and he had virtually lost none of that improvement that he had gained. And so we did the same thing, just with the pads and then some more body work. And that was back in February. And so I've just been in touch with Sue, and who owns Qatar, and she said he is still better than he was before that clinic. And I think she has bought some other kind of pads, because, you know, some kind of foam or something to use as well. But I think she's probably a lady in her senior years. And as I said, she's been breeding Rottweilers for a long, long time, and showing dogs, etc. And she was really, really concerned about this dog, very concerned about him. So for her to say that to say there was an improvement, and then that he still has some gain, even though he hasn't been near the SURE Paws since February, I think we can believe that. You know, she's
that's really amazing. All right, so this is the push for me to get going and getting more pads into production. Then I guess that's kind of what I'm hearing. Is we need those pads to keep his improvement going. That's an amazing story.
I don't like. It's really tricky, because dogs, like horses, it's really difficult to decide between neurological and dysfunction from pain, and quite often there's both. But there are so many dogs out there with neurological conditions, and more, because we're just breeding some dogs so they're set up to have them, basically. And I'm not, I love German Shepherds, but I'm sorry if you breed German Shepherds.
I know, like.
That's cool. And if, you know, I've had quite a few dogs that we think have neurological problems that have really improved with the SURE Paws. And as I said, you can't really use the other balance equipment for them. It's not appropriate, it's too difficult, etc. If we can just improve their quality of life, you know, for a short time, yeah, it's worth finishing off.
Okay. All right, I'll get back
and getting it out there. You know, when I know that other people can buy them, like I recently spent some time in the practice with the canine rehab vet in Canberra, Sandra Hassett. And yeah, when I know that people can get them, I'm gonna, you know, I'll go back to Sandra and say, hey, have a look at these, and just let her have a set to play with. And yeah, because she's gonna see a big
I get it. And that's the thing is, sometimes it's, you know, we've got a lot going on. We're about to launch our new Surefoot Equine website. We're gonna probably do a soft opening tomorrow. No promises just yet, but have it really geared up. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. It's been really exciting between the what's happening with Surefoot, and now with, you know, just even the small that we've gotten out there with SURE Paws, to hear what's happening. And I know it's going to help a lot of dogs. So it's just something that we have, you know, once I can get a few things handled, we can get back to that. But it's really fascinating to hear your stories. And I really appreciate you sharing this time with us, because I don't have a dog, so I'm not working with dogs. And I do know that Susie Zielinski, who put up a bunch of posts tonight, she's a dog groomer, and she's been using them really successfully in her dog grooming business. So maybe I have to have Susie on to talk about how to use that during dog grooming. Because again, there's lots of different uses, whether it's rehab, whether it's, you know, relaxing. We've had Felice tell us that dogs that were really nervous in thunderstorms calm down using SURE Paws. And, you know, like, nothing is going to fix everything, but if it can just help the dogs a little bit, then you're running away. Where are you going?
I know, because I have to bring Harry over to show you. So you saw a picture of her sitting on the SURE Paws before. She says that's very uncomfortable being held up to the camera.
I don't want to look at the camera.
So she's really, really, she's very reactive to thunderstorms and wind. And we, lots of noisy wind around here.
Yeah, you do.
And after I read that piece from the lady in Finland about using them with the thunderstorms, I thought, I'm going to give that a try. So the first time we had the thunderstorm, I sat on the floor with her on a SURE Paws pad. So she was in between my knees, basically. So she was on the SURE Paws pad and I was cuddling her at the same time. And then we had another thunderstorm only a night or two later, and I did the same thing. And she was noticeably more relaxed. Now, I've tried sitting on the floor with her before, and it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. And then we haven't had a thunderstorm for a while, but we have had a lot of wind. And you know what? You always forget what something was like before when the problem's gone. And we had huge wind the last couple of nights here. And normally she would be trying to get in my bed, she'd be crying. I haven't even heard a peep. And that's kind of, sorry, I can't remember her name. Is it Susie? No.
No, Felice Deppler.
Felice. So that's kind of what Felice was saying about them too. Off you go, thanks, Gary. Was that the effect was quite quick, and like the problem just seems to have almost gone away. And I only did it twice. So I don't know. Like I said, we need more,
and that's the thing is,
body of work.
The same thing when we started with the horses, and like the little stories that start coming in, like using surefoot pads when a horse is colicking. You get these little stories, and you don't want to like broadcast it out because it's a serious problem, and it may not help every dog, but we're starting to get reports about the SURE Paws pads helping dogs, like with thunderstorms, like with wind, the same way we kind of get the reports that Surefoots helped horses with colic. So it's not like I'm going to run out and say this is a cure-all for things, but it is interesting to start hearing these stories. And as you say, we tend to forget when something really changes. We're like, oh yeah, when did that happen? When did that change? Yeah. I forgot all about, yeah, you're right, And so that's really fascinating. And this has just been, Robyn, I think we've had more time to talk about the effects here in this hour than when I have been in Australia, because we're busy doing other things and working on horses, and there's activity, or I'm doing a workshop. So it's been so nice to sit here and talk with you and listen to how you're using SURE Paws. And it's inspiring to me to make me go out and get more pads into production and get the large pads back, because right now we have the small ones, but for your bigger dogs, you do need the larger pads. So
yeah, I understand that it makes them expensive, but I guess that's the owner's choice. If you can afford to manufacture some, there's a lot of the clients that I deal with, they would spend anything if they thought it was going to work.
Well, it's not like you have to buy them over and over again. As long as you keep your dog's teeth away from them, your pads have been in a lot of work for quite a while, and they look perfect.
And they've had horses standing on them too, not often, but I'm always a bit nervous when a horse stands on them, in case I do break it. But so far so good. My little mare had bloat last week, and one of the first things I reached for was the half physio bag. She's not a huge fan of the Surefoot. She likes the pods, and I did actually try them, but I think she was a bit too distressed. But the half physio pad, just 1 foot, and I'm sure it made a difference.
Yeah, I love that half physio. I call it the emergency pad. I never wanted to leave home without one. You can put people on it, dogs on it, horses on it. It's really, really handy. Yeah. Well, we've come to the end of our hour, Robyn. I mean, that's flown by. It's been such a pleasure to have you. And thank you everybody for joining us. I'll probably have to have Robyn back at some point so we can continue this conversation. But in the meantime, you can find all my webinars on my Surefoot Equine Surefoot Equine YouTube channel. And Robyn's will be posted up there as soon as I finish processing it. Please do go look there and look at some of the other videos, because I think if you see the horses, it'll help you have ideas about what to do with your dogs. And I'm hoping maybe I'll get Susie on and interview her to find out how to use them for grooming. If you do have horses and you are interested in buying some SURE foot pads for your horses, we are running a 10% discount right now. If you use the discount code LRK3DE, it stands for Land Rover Kentucky 3-day event, which was supposed to be last weekend and was canceled. We were supposed to be there with a booth. So if you use that discount code, you'll get 10% off. It's good through tomorrow, through May 1st. Robyn, thank you again for joining us. This has been a pleasure. It's so nice to be able to see you. And you know, the one really great thing about this whole pandemic is that it's just been fabulous to interview people and hear how you're, you know, what you're doing and everything. It's really exciting.
It is, and thanks for entrusting me with the testing model. It's been a lot of fun, and feel free to post that video that I did in isolation, or part of it if you like.
Oh, the one that's on your Facebook page?
Yeah, the one I sent you the link to. It's
yes.
Yes,
and you can find Robyn on Facebook at Pet Miracle and Equine Miracle, right?
Yes. Yeah, so there's lots more pictures and stuff of the SURE Paws on the Pet Miracle page, but that was, we're in quarantine because we've been on holidays. So that was a bit of fun. It was, you know, lighthearted, but yeah. So it looks a bit weird.
Yep, I'll post it up. So you can go to the SURE Paws page on Facebook. That's where I'm going to put the link to this video. And well, I'll put up the link from Robyn. And once again, thank you so much for being my guest this evening. And thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.